Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Victory Road World Cup of Pokemon VGC, sponsored by Elgato. I'm Maeve. I'm back again, but I'm joined for the first time by Joseph Ugarte. So, Joseph, welcome. We've had some absolutely crazy matches today, and you and I are here for possibly the match point.
Yeah, I know. This is like pretty much make or break, right? Like, I don't think any team wants to be in this position when you're at this stake, pretty much with these stakes in World Cup, right? Kind of a similar situation to what happened between the United States and Spain. We were kind of down like 3-1, similar aspect, and like being in that position is never fun, and it's definitely very stressful for the players playing at the time, right? So you're kind of putting yourself in a position where it's like, I really need the win for my team to help carry it on. But I am really excited to see it. It's just really cool to see like kind of just the top players of each country just kind of throw down, like, and just really put their all into winning, right? And it's a very enjoyable thing to watch.
Yeah, and so Joe, as a manager for United States, right, if you're looking at this team and you are Team South Korea, you know you're do or die right now, right? You're on the line. What do you say to your players, right? What do you say to the next person up or the rest of your team, right? Like, how as a coach do you coach them?
Well, I guess also too, technically I was a player, but like kind of similar, you know, like I felt like in Team US we felt like pretty equal, you know, so we all like talked to each other, you know, like no one was really like, obviously managers submitted roster, but like we're all very straight with each other. And like the number one thing I can say is like being encouraging to your teammates is really important. Sometimes like it can get really stressful and like you can kind of put a lot of extra pressure on yourself. So I think it's very crucial to like kind of remind people like, yeah, you're good at this game, dude. Like you can win. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't matter what the record is. Like, if you play well in that situation, you're going to do fine and you're going to win, you know? And I think that's the number one important thing for any team to recognize. It doesn't matter what the score is. It matters who wins what, right? So.
Absolutely. So, like you said, it doesn't matter what the score is when you're playing, but if we're looking at the score right now and we jump over to our pairings for the rest of the day, we will be able to see, like we've said, it is currently 3-0 Italy. So, you know, South Korea has to win these next 4 matches in a row to keep their dream alive to move on to the finals. Joe and I will be able to take a look at Emanuele Ciliberto and Minwoo Lim. So really interesting match between these two players for South Korea and for Italy, knowing that it's do or die. And I know we were able to take a peek from the, you know, during that break, everybody is able to kind of see what the teams are running. And we will be viewing this from Minwoo's side. And Minwoo has a team we've already seen before today on stream today. So we'll be able to take a look at it from another perspective, because we've seen now that this is the second time South Korea is bringing this team to the match.
Oh, definitely. I'm actually incredibly excited to see Minwoo's team. So one thing that was kind of used over the course of World Cup by some players was Cherimdon, right? So this archetype has been constantly developing, and we've kind of seen it progress over time, change a little bit in shape. I'm really excited to see the Dragapult. Dragapult typically runs Choice Band, and Choice Band Dragapult with Sun boosted Flower Gift is like actually really strong, right? So we could potentially see it showing up here, obviously depending on the matchup. But another key thing to recognize, I think, is the use of Pokemon that can't get faked out, right? So Entei is really good because it benefits off of Groudon Sun, and it's also unable to get faked out, so it can constantly put on offense, right? Dragapult, similar concept, clear body, unable to get intimidated. So it allows it to push out constant damage without the risk of having it stopped by Intimidate. The one thing to notice about this team, though, is that it is very physical. So pretty much there are very little things that you can use to hit on the special side with this team.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, paired with those Pokemon, it is that team we saw before. So it's the Groudon, the Incineroar, the Entei, the Cherrim, the Porygon 2, and the Dragapult. This team has come up a couple of times in the past week. We did see it get a little bit, struggle a little bit against the matchup versus Italy earlier. I believe it was playing Xerneas there for Flavio, and Flavio was able to masterfully position around this team. So, you know, a really interesting way to see how he's going to be able to, you know, battle against Emanuele. But Emanuele is running Calyrex Shadow Rider, which we haven't seen yet today, paired with that Incineroar, the Rillaboom, the Urshifu, Rapid Strike, Nihilego, and Whimsicott. So Whimsicott can be a really great partner to deal with possibly some of the moves from the Pokemon on Minwoo's side.
Yeah, so I have to admit here, knowing Emanuele, obviously, from grassroots tournaments and stuff, I'm not too surprised to see the Calyrex choice. You've kind of seen him developing this archetype over the course of this series, right? right? So before it used to have the Regieleki over the Whimsicott, and now we're actually seeing the Whimsicott here, right? So it kind of gives it tailwind, right? It kind of helps with the mirror. Also, you're able to put out a bunch of damage with Calyrex. So kind of similar concept, just execute in a different way, right? Calyrex is going to be spreading those Astral Barrages all over, getting a bunch of damage. Then you have Urshifu, Incineroar, and Rillaboom to kind of round out those cores as a, you can play it defensively or you can play it more offensively. And the offensive synergy here combined between all these mons is really useful, right? Because you're able to put out constant damage, but you're also able to pivot properly if need be. And Nihilego is also a great choice as well. It usually gives these Calyrex teams ways to deal with specifically Yveltal and Xerneas, right? In this case, probably not as relevant because this is going to be versus Groudon, right? But it is a very well-constructed team and very consistent, which is why I'm not surprised to see it at this stage of the tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, really interesting for both of these teams, right? You have to be prepared with this matchup. Both Calyrex and Groudon have those double targeting moves, right? Groudon is not as accurate as Calyrex, but if you're able to set it up, especially now taking a peek behind the screen, we're seeing it's that Choice Band on that Groudon and Dragapult is Focus Sash. So this looks like the exact same team that we saw earlier in the day with that Choice Band Groudon with the Flower Gift, with the Helping Hand from Cherrim in the sun. Was an absolute powerhouse. It was able to fully knock out 2 full health Pokemon pretty much, or maybe even with a small amount of chip damage. So it's going to be something you cannot disregard.
Yeah, I'm really interested actually about the Citrus Berry on the Cherrim. Typically you'll see it run something like Aqua Berry or Focus Sash because they're not typically that bulky, right? But you see, obviously the Focus Sash is being taken up by the Dragapult, right? So in this case, we're actually going to see the Cherrim running the Citrus Berry. So probably not intended to take something like a Flare Blitz from Incineroar. You probably, wouldn't want to eat that anyways, but with something like Aqua, you probably could. So I guess that's something to be aware of if the Cherrim were to come in this matchup. The one thing to note, though, is that Choice Band Groudon actually has a lot of damage output, right? So even if you take a turn where you're able to swap in Cherrim and boost the Groudon's Precipice Blades, that can pretty much one-shot both opposing mons if it's in the right situation, right? So it's just a very nice option there, and I definitely like the option as well of P2 here, potentially setting Trick Room. These Calyrex teams do kind of struggle with Trick Room, so it'd be nice to see that come as well.
Yeah, and going into this lead, it'll be interesting to see if you go for that Trick Room with that Groudon, possibly try to slow the game down, especially in front of something like a Tailwind with a Whimsicott with a Calyrex, who can both, really turn the tides, put on that offensive pressure, like we've seen literally every single match today. Every single match has been offensive, has been fast. Calyrex and Whimsicott, though, are the lead here, so, could possibly be seeing something like a Trick Room, maybe, but instead it's going to be Entei and Groudon, 2 Pokemon that love having the sun up to help them and put a lot of pressure on with something like a Sacred Fire or a Precipice Blades.
See, what's great about leads like these as well, especially with the Cherrimdon archetype, is you really kind of force their hand, right? Because you're pretty much forced to Tailwind here, which is really good, because then you're basically saying you need the Tailwind, so you can't do something like Grass Knot my Groudon if you have it, right? And you can't go for any other kind of move that would disrupt the team, right? You're forced into Tailwind, so you're forced into one linear play that can be punished. So over here, we're going to see the Calyrex Protect, right? And it's kind of just a staple of this team, how it likes to kind of keep itself safe.
Yeah, and that Tailwind, like you said, that Whimsicott had to go for here. Entei went for a Sacred Fire into that Calyrex. It did not connect. Groudon here also goes for a Precipice Blades. Obviously will not connect through that Protect, but most importantly will hit this Whimsicott. May reveal that item. Instead, this Whimsicott is incredibly bulky, able to handle that Precipice Blades pretty well in the face of both of these Pokemon.
See, what I'm most intrigued to see here is pretty much the Cherrim being utilized, right? Because, obviously we got a little sneak peek there of what's going on, but typically with these Groudon teams, you'll want to swap in Cherrim at the crucial turns to really eat up an attack, right? You're boosting your special defense, which is really good, and it's kind of all about knowing what you need to preserve and what you need to keep around, and I think that being able to swap it in and boost the special defense of either the Groudon or the Entei here is really good. And in terms of Emanuele's end, you're pretty much trying to get as much damage as possible in this Tailwind to kind of prevent the Groudon from being able to do work later in the game. So, yeah.
Yeah, Groudon does switch out here, brings in that Cherrim, like you said, able to possibly boost the attack of this Entei, knowing this Calyrex cannot protect on this turn, and if it does, it's going to have a tougher time to do so, and deal with some special defense boosts as well. Calyrex will go first with that Astral Barrage, thanks to that Tailwind, really boosting the speeds on that side of the field. Does do well over half to both of these Pokemon, reveals the Life Orb on the Calyrex as well. Whimsicott, though, goes for a Moonblast, so that is its damaging move of choice. Into this Entei does very little damage, because Whimsicott not known to be the strongest Pokemon, but most importantly, gets gets that drop there on that special defense. Entei, though, goes for a Flare Blitz here onto the Calyrex, so interesting to see that that's the move it's carrying. Is able to get the knockout early onto this Calyrex, get rid of that double targeting threat, will take a bit of recoil chip for its troubles as well, and the Citrus Berry is now able to be eaten because that Unnerve is off of the field with that Calyrex. So the Entei actually knocks itself out with its own recoil there, so you may be able to bring in that Groudon now and maybe deal some nice damage.
Yeah, so one thing that I think is really interesting about kind of how this was played, right, is like you're pretty much seeing a prioritization of removing the Calyrex first, specifically that threatens Groudon a little bit more, and then kind of setting up Groudon to sweep the rest of the game. Now, one thing that can potentially make that a little more difficult is a couple things, right? If Whimsicott's running something like Grass Knot, that can obviously present some difficulties. Also, too, if there's a Rillaboom in the back, that can also be a little annoying. Even Urshifu would probably be a bit annoying to deal with, but you do have Sun Up, right? So it's a little bit better of a situation. I am really intrigued to see what Emanuele brought in the back. I'm assuming that one potential game plan that you could have gone with here is trying to remove the Entei early and then having something in the back that can sweep the rest of the team, because Entei is really the main fire type that is going to be pressuring the team, and we are going to see the Rillaboom come out here, actually.
Yeah, Rillaboom comes out. Porygon 2 also is the Pokemon sent out for Minwoo, so that shows the Pokemon in the back for Minwoo. All 4 Pokemon are revealed now, so you at least know possibly that you don't have something like that Dragapult in the back maybe to deal with. Also shows, you know, you don't have... you do not have that Incineroar as well, so you don't have that fake out pressure, while this Rillaboom has the fake out pressure as well on the field, possibly for this Porygon 2, who may be going for something like a Trick Room. This Whimsicott may have maybe an ability to, or maybe a move here that could possibly handle with this Trick Room as well, if they're trying to make sure that they can keep their speed going with that Tailwind is from the Whimsicott's Prankster. You know, there also is a possibility for this Porygon to go for some sort of powerful attack. If it's carrying something like an Ice Beam into something like that, Rillaboom could be really nice to get some strong damage off onto either of these Pokemon, really, because that Rillaboom is such a big threat onto the Groudon on the field, though. Whimsicott Moonblast once again into this Porygon 2 just to get a bit of chip damage here. Rillaboom also able to go for a U-turn into the Cherrim. Isn't enough to knock it out. Does a pretty good chunk of damage, though, so that's going to allow for Emanuele to switch out here and possibly reveal that last Pokemon on his team.
See, I think that if the switch is something like an Incineroar, this is a pretty decent position, where it's actually the Nihilego. Kind of surprised by that almost, because this and Trick Room is going to actually struggle a lot, and Cherrim also gets to utilize a move like Solar Beam. If Solar Beam is targeting the right slot here, it could do a lot of damage and potentially even remove this Nihilego in one shot, so I'm kind of curious to see where it goes into. It does go into Nihilego, does a lot of damage.
Yeah, that Solar Blade, though, not able to knock it out here, but an Ice Beam should be able to finish off this Nihilego. You have immediately done a great double target and removed the threat. A Solar Blade, an interesting move, too. You had to be expecting a switch there, because Solar Blade is not very effective against a Rillaboom, even if an Ice Beam is. So, really nice positioning here from Minwoo.
Yeah, I mean, at this point too, right, like, you've pretty much taken the big KO that you want in the back. I mean, Nihilego was really the last main offensive threat, I think, coming out from Emanuele here. Now, Rillaboom has a lot on its plate, right? It needs to be able to remove the Groudon. You can attack here, or you can set Trick Room. There is the potential of a Whimsicott carrying Taunt, so you could want to avoid that. You can just try and keep your Cherrim safe here and just try and pick up the Whimsicott, and then just kind of spam Ice Beams into Rillaboom. Pretty safe situation here. I think this is pretty rough for Emanuele. You pretty much need to get every turn right at this point, right? So if there's a Protect, you need to call it. If there is a Swap, you need to call it. So
yeah, especially, and if there's something like a Trick Room, like you said, you need to call it. There is, of course, the threat of Ice Beam, which is super effective onto both of the Pokemon on Emanuele's side, that Whimsicott and that Rillaboom, so neither one are really going to want to deal with something like an Ice Beam. Thankfully, the sun's up right now, so you can't get frozen at the moment, but that's not going to be up for much too longer, even if you still have your Groudon in the back. Cherrim goes for a Protect this turn, though, not wanting to take something like a U-turn, maybe from either of these Pokemon. Whimsicott once again goes for a Moonblast into that Cherrim, will not connect, though. Rillaboom goes for a knockoff onto the Porygon 2. We'll take out that Porygon 2's Eviolite this turn. Porygon goes for an Ice Beam, so no Trick Room. Even though it moved last, it is still the slowest thing on the field, able to get that Whimsicott off of the field. So now it's just Rillaboom.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this P2 is doing a lot of work here, right? I feel like when we first saw this matchup, I wasn't exactly expecting P2. Obviously, it's good into Calyrex, right? I wasn't expecting to get as many KOs as it is, but it is putting in a lot of work, right? This Ice Beam is actually dealing a bunch of damage. You remove Whimsicott, remove Nihilego, and now it's probably going to end up removing Rillaboom too, right? So this P2 is definitely a threat, and I think something that Emanuele really needs to consider going into Game 2.
Yeah, and looking at the moves right now on this Cherrim, I'm seeing Pollen Puff, right? Which is a very common move on Cherrim. But that means that putting this Cherrim in the sun with this Porygon 2, Porygon 2 has recovered, Cherrim has Pollen Puff as well. Cherrim really could just boost Porygon to sit on the field as long as you wanted, maybe for another game state, right? Not now, obviously, because you are just facing down one Pokemon left. You don't have to worry about something like a Fake Out, because Fake Out's already gone. You have lost your Eviolite through the knockoff, so that at least shows that it is carrying knockoff as an offensive move, and U-turn as well. So, you know, maybe you don't have to worry about something like a Wood Hammer. You just have to be careful of what the moveset is. Helping Hand from the Cherrim, though, is going to boost this Ice Beam from this Porygon 2. Rillaboom will go for a Grassy Glide first, though. Does a pretty good chunk of damage, especially with that Eviolite knocked off. This Ice Beam, Porygon 2, not the strongest Pokemon, but it still does well over half, almost 2/3 of the HP there. So, Sun's now off of the field. Grassy terrain is still on, but that means that Cherrim's Flower Gift has disappeared for now.
No, I mean, honestly, at this point, right, it's just, you know, it's going through formalities, right? Like, the game's over. You're pretty much just trying to potentially see how much damage things are doing. That's the last, like, kind of valuable thing you can get. Maybe try and get an extra move out of the P2, but there's no reason for it to really click anything by Ice Beam, right? At this point, right, I think that one adjustment that could potentially help Emanuele here would actually end up being the Urshifu, right? Because as you can see, the breaking through the P2 is like a really big problem once you lose like pretty much the damage from your team. I think even if P2 had been led in this instance, right, it would have given the Calyrex Whimsicott lead some trouble, because there wasn't really anything to directly break it besides Nihilego with Meteor Beam, but even then it's still a little questionable, right? So it is really crucial in this matchup. I mean, we're gonna see Cherrim here in its sad form, just kind of, you know, giving the Helping Hand boost, one last goodbye before it kind of goes away. But yeah, I think definitely I would like to see an adjustment from Emanuele going into the second game.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, right? Because that Nihilego only came in on a rough switch in and, you know, was completely double targeted out of the game. Wasn't able to do what it really wants to do, which is get off that Meteor Beam, get that special attack boost, and possibly get a couple of more boosts along the way with that Beast Boost ability, just from getting some important knockouts off onto some of these Pokemon. So I think, like you said, the Urshifu could be nice because, you know, even if the sun's up, you can still go for something like a close combat into that Porygon 2. You can still have the ability to detect through a couple of these moves, and, you know, having the option for critical hits as long as the sun is off the field can be pretty important as well, especially if these teams have all the boosts that they have, or are able to start kind of steamrolling, especially if this Groudon can get itself in a pretty good position but then loses the sun over time.
Yeah, and you saw Groudon didn't even need to be brought out there, actually. It was just kind of, you know, chilling on the bench saying, you know, I'll keep it warm for you guys. But I think that going into the game 2, we might potentially see it actually be a little more active depending on the adjustments that we see. I really think, too, that what was brought in this matchup was actually really good, right? Like, I don't really see much need to deviate from it. I think Emanuele is the one who's forced to make the adjustment, right? I think it's always that kind of concept in best of 3. It's like, do I adjust or do I not adjust, right? It's like, do I need to change anything? I think in that case, you're pretty safe to say you don't really need to adjust too much. It's really putting the ball in Emanuele's court to kind of figure out how to beat that.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing that's really interesting to me too is by leaving the Incineroar, right? You oftentimes, if you're running Calyrex, you assume the Incineroar is going to come because it might have a move that can take out your Calyrex, can be a little bit tougher to deal with. But by not even bringing it, you're taking care of that Calyrex by sheer force alone. Not the ability sheer force, of course, but, you know, just sheer force in terms of the power output that you can give. And by having that Cherrim, it's just such a strong wall for these teams. It's almost like having your own light screen, right? And just by being a Pokemon version of a light screen that can also do damage and possibly heal your partner Pokemon up or help boost their attacks, it can really make it just tough to deal with, especially if you know that you can switch in and you know how well your Pokemon are trained, and you say, oh, if I switch in my Cherrim here, then I know this Astral Barrage won't be enough to knock it out, so I have to make sure that I, you know, allow for that positioning. Calyrex and Whimsicott, though, the exact same lead we saw from game 1, and I believe we'll see the exact same lead as well with that Groudon and that Entei here from Minwoo.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if we're going to see a different turn 1, right? Because last time we saw the Calyrex play a bit more defensively, kind of allowed for a swap to come in. I think Whimsicott's still really forced into tailwinding here. I think it's too risky to really do anything else, right? And the nice thing that I really like here is the Entei using Flare Blitz, right? Because you're pretty much pinning that slot. Whatever comes in is going to be taking a bunch of damage, but we are probably going to see an inversion on this, actually, with the Cherrim coming in on the Entei slot, right? This is actually a really good play with Cherrim down as well, because that Precipice Blade is going to be doing damage regardless of what it connects on, right? So I'm pretty sure even if Rilla came in, it would be taking like over half of its damage, over half of its health.
Yeah, absolutely. But the key word there is if it connects, right? Because Precipice Blades is not the most accurate move. So you need to make sure that you are hitting your Precipice Blades and getting that important damage off onto these two Pokemon that will not love to deal with that damage. We saw Whimsicott was able to take a Precipice Blades far better in game one, especially even with this Tailwind up and this Calyrex being able to go for that Astral Barrage early. So, you know, Calyrex, knowing that this is not a Focus Sash Cherrim as well, you have to make sure that you are able to deal with that, which you do comfortably, right? But you can't take another one without allowing that Calyrex to get a Grenade boost. Groudon, though, goes for a Precipice Blades into both of these Pokemon. It is enough to knock out the Calyrex, though. So a massive Choice Banded, Flower Gift boosted Precipice Blades is enough to take care of that Calyrex, which allows this Cherrim to eat its Citrus Berry through that Unnerve. So incredible turn one once again.
No, yeah, I mean, that was honestly like insane damage, right? Like and this is obviously not too surprising because it is a Groudon, right? But I still think that like people really can sometimes undervalue how much damage Groudon can really put out. I mean, with the, you know, obviously with the exception, like you kind of need to connect your move. If you don't connect your move, then it's doing no damage. It's like a high risk, high reward mod almost. And I know it's like 85 accuracy, so it may sound like a bit of an over exaggeration, but it actually comes into play more often than you'd like to think. I mean, a lot of people, I'm sure, are like rolling in their graves right now when I'm talking about Precipice Blades misses, because like a lot of tournament runs have ended to it, right? So you're kind of relying on that connecting, but when it does connect, it is doing a lot of work, right? So in this case, I'd hope we'd see something maybe a little bit different from Emanuele, right? You don't kind of want a repeat of the same turn one. We are going to see the Urshifu actually, so that is probably going to help a little bit dealing with P2 and maybe potentially Groudon.
Yeah, absolutely. Urshifu is a great switch in here possibly instead of that Nihilego, but like you said, you know, Precipice Blade's missing. It doesn't, you know, it's not a 50% accuracy like we sometimes talk like it is, but you know, it can be a really important move if you do not make it. Like our very first match today on game 3, it was determined by a play rough miss, which allowed Italy to get that first point over South Korea. So, you know, when your moves aren't fully accurate, you can have the perfect game plan, but sometimes it just doesn't work out, and that's just how luck works with Pokemon sometimes. You know, you're not going to hit every single attack. You just have to be careful. You know, maybe, you know, especially if you weren't able to knock out that Calyrex that turn, if you missed that Calyrex, it would still be able to get off another attack next turn and then take out your Cherrim and get a Grenade boost, right? But so Porygon 2 can come in now instead of that Groudon. We'll be able to get those boosts from that Cherrim. Cherrim's going to go for a Protect, though, this turn, not going to be taking any damage. So Whimsicott will be able to possibly go for something here. It goes for a Grass Knot into this Porygon, which was that Groudon. So a really interesting choice here. Close combat, though, from that Urshifu is not enough to knock it out, interestingly enough, but does a ton of damage, but drops the defense and special defense of that Urshifu.
Okay, I take back the good swap part because it did just eat a close combat on the way in. I was like really excited. I was like, oh yeah, close combat's definitely what's it called? Not going into P2. No, it did go into P2. I think the Grass Knot reveal is actually really important information to know, right? Unfortunately, at this point, your Porygon is looking like it's going to be struggling a little bit. You can try and get Trick Room up if it's possible. Unlikely that you know, Emanuele is going to let that happen, but you are going to be able to potentially put out a Solar Blade with Cherrim and kind of bring the Urshifu down its sash if it does have a sash. If it's a bulkier Urshifu, even then you can still chunk it down, right? So it can kind of be picked off by anything. Still think this is like a pretty okay position for Minwoo, but also but the Encore, actually, I take that back as well.
Yeah, Encore means that you're not going to be able to go for a Solar Blade while another close combat takes down that Porygon 2. This means that this Cherrim is going to be stuck protecting as well instead of going for maybe what it wanted to go for, which probably was that Solar Blade this turn, like you said, because it wasn't able to do so. So really nice Encore, showing that tech move, shows all 4 moves on this Whimsicott, right? You've got Encore, Grass Knot, Moonblast, and Tailwind. So that means you at least know possibly what kind of moves that this Whimsicott is carrying for later, and now you have to send in your Entei in front of an Urshifu.
Yeah, I am incredibly like enthusiastic, I guess I'd put it, for Minwoo's position. The only thing that you really have to be terrified of is this Urshifu. Like, it can put out so much damage. I think at this point, right, maybe you want to be fishing for a Sacred Fire Burn on the Urshifu, right, to kind of make your game a little bit easier. It kind of reduces its damage. You do have Sun Up, which is nice. I am curious to see if if Groudon comes in early, if Sun's going to expire at like an inopportune time, because then at that point you're definitely relying on the burn, right? So you don't want to be in a situation where Whimsicott gets Tailwind back up, but you also don't want to be in a situation where Urshifu's going to be able to go for Surging Strikes outside of Sun.
Yeah, Cherrim switches out here, not loving being locked into that Protect. So Groudon will take its place. Like you said, the sun is really kind of winding down, so it may have to switch in and out once more. Whimsicott goes for a Moonblast into the Entei. Not a very effective move, but most importantly gets a special attack drop. Entei we've seen is physical, so not all that important. But another close combat from that Urshifu was not enough to knock that Entei out. But this Urshifu would probably get knocked over by a gentle feather, I think, at this point. Sacred Fire, though, into the Whimsicott, able to knock this Whimsicott out. You know, unless this Urshifu is carrying a Focus Sash, you know, it could get easily knocked out. I believe it's at -3 in both defense and special defense after all of these close combats, but this Entei still hangs on.
Yeah, I mean, very, very tight position, right? Because in some regard, with this Nihilego in the back, there actually is a good potential of the Urshifu Nihilego to kind of run through the rest of the team, assuming that Entei is lost here, right? It's tough. You want to land Precipice Blades here. Precipice Blades connects and Groudon does not go down here. The game is essentially over, right? Because then Cherrim can kind of clean up, you know, Urshifu. You're in a pretty good position, right? But also, too, if there's some way for the Groudon to get KO'd immediately this turn, then it's not such a great position, right? Because then you're going to pretty much just lose to the Entei, or not the Entei, the Urshifu and the Nihilego's like combination of offense. So
yeah, absolutely. And you can still send Cherrim in here and maybe you get a little bit of help on your attack, but you know, this is kind of the end of, you know, you're kind of winding down to the end of the sun, so you have to make sure that you preserve it, especially to stop something like those Surging Strikes. Cherrim comes in, gets that really cute flower gift up. Is it a much happier than it would have been without the sun? But Nihilego goes for a Protect here, not going for something like a Meteor Beam. We'll still be able to kind of hang on through this turn. Urshifu goes for Detect as well, so Urshifu actually also protecting this turn, not able to take any damage from something like this Entei, maybe going for that Sacred Fire. So a bit more of a passive turn. Sun's off the field, but now you just have to possibly lose your Entei and allow for your Groudon to switch in for free.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, right, like, it was nice to be able to pivot. I think that was actually like a very good turn. The thing you have to be concerned about, right, is like the Entei potentially getting Aqua Jetted, also to not taking too much damage if your Groudon comes back in. There are a lot of factors in this end game where I think that Emanuele has actually positioned himself pretty well. You know, that early chip with Astral Barrage didn't seem like too much, but it actually is really important in this end game, right? Because a lot of stuff is in range of a double that it normally wouldn't be. So I think that was like honestly like a really important thing to kind of pull yourself ahead in early on, right? By getting that extra damage with the Astral Barrage, right? And like you recognize that maybe you don't need Calyrex for that later part of the game. One thing that could potentially change how this end of game works is if the Urshifu's Choice Band, because that close combat was doing a bunch of damage, but because P2 lived it, I'm pretty sure it's not. So more likely, oh, maybe it is actually.
I don't know. It is that Focus Sash, I believe, Joe.
Oh, okay,
I don't think a -3/-3 would be able to survive a Sacred Fire without it. But that burn is going to wrap that Urshifu up here. Nihilego, though, goes for a Sludge Bomb into the Groudon slot. That was that Cherrim who switched out. Groudon does get the poison as well. So all of these secondary effects kind of coming out this turn. But a close combat plus a burn, not going to be super helpful for this Urshifu to do the damage that it really wanted to. So now Urshifu is going to be kind of forced here to take that burn damage and get knocked out, and now you have to worry about this Nihilego, who, you know, at this point maybe it could go for a Meteor Beam, but it's not the most defensive of Pokemon really, so it's not going to be able to live a couple of these attacks from this Groudon who can do that super effective damage.
Yeah, I mean, the one really intriguing thing here that I think that we saw throughout the set that I think was honestly just incredibly well played from Minwoo's end, right, was pretty much getting all the swaps right. I think the reason Urshifu didn't go for an Aqua Jet there was just because you were worried about Entei swapping out, right, and bringing in Groudon, and then it's kind of a wasted turn, right? And unfortunately, Emanuele getting that turn wrong. I definitely think Emanuele's adjustment this game specifically was pretty good. I mean, the game's not fully over, but obviously it's not the best situation, right? At this point, preserving the Entei is probably the best thing you can do. Try and get in the Cherrim to let the Groudon live, which it does. So yeah, this is a pretty good position, and we're gonna see Stomping Tantrum come out as well.
Yeah, Stomping Tantrum is going to be the move that knocks out the Nihilego here, showing exactly how important this Cherrim is, but most importantly, getting a point on the board for South Korea in what was a match point. So now we're able to move forward here, knowing that this is still a bit of a do or die situation for both teams, right? Italy need these next wins from either of these next 3 games. South Korea needs every single one. So they're getting on the right foot here with Minwoo's win and showing exactly how good that Groudon team can be that we didn't really get to see showcase everything that it's capable of. So incredible play by both players, absolutely. Really nice to see South Korea getting a point on the board, making sure that we'll still have a very interesting next few matches for you guys.
Oh, of course.
You know, we want to keep the drama up as well, just from a standpoint of entertainment, I believe, a little bit. But most importantly, I think for us, it makes it more interesting to cast and for you viewers to make sure that you can watch. But you know, really interesting matchup here. I loved seeing, you know, interesting to see, almost like reminds me of Santino in Players Cup 1, right? Where he was able to let his Colossal go down, but most importantly got that damage up. But that Calyrex, they almost went for the same thing, where you lose your Calyrex turn 1, but you get that important damage off right in the beginning, but wasn't able to pay off in this time.
Yeah, I always say like the number one thing to recognize in VGC, specifically it's very important in these kind of matchups, is knowing when to let something go down, when you need to get damage down on the board, or when you need to preserve something for later, right? And we kind of saw both of those skills being utilized there, right? Emanuele knowing I need to get damage down early, so everything's in range. Fortunately, obviously, the way it played out, it was just a couple of swaps that didn't really work out in Emanuele's favor. But I still feel like the way the game was executed was like very clean, right? You're pretty much doing exactly what you need to in those circumstances, kind of making the plays you need to kind of put yourself in a winning position, right? And it just so happened that there was 1 or 2 plays that really just pushed it into Minwoo's favor, right? And kept South Korea alive. So I'm really excited to see these next games, right? If it's going to be something more along those lines with 2 really offensive teams, or if it's going to be something a little bit more with pivoty defensive teams, right? Because that's kind of the interesting thing with this format. You either see something that's a little more aggressive, putting out a bunch of damage, or something that's a little bit more pivoty, kind of position based.
Yeah, and we have seen full aggression today from both of these teams. So actually making our casting go a lot faster than we thought. I thought I'd be here at doing this match at around 4 o'clock sometimes, because, you know, sometimes these players will bring, like you said, really bulky defensive teams. So we've had a really awesome, very fast-paced, high-stakes matches all day. So we'll be taking a quick break, but hopefully we can bring you some more of those after that. So do not go anywhere.